Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another Question the Narrative video, and today's topic is D.U.M.B.S, Mount Weather, and Armageddon. And of course, by D.U.M.B.S, I mean deep underground military bases. So this is just a photo that a friend had given me of some of these. And I'm sure that most of you have heard of D.U.M.B.S. I think everyone, even those who aren't looking into the truth about things, have heard about D.U.M.B.S, at least at some point. And so what really got me to thinking about D.U.M.B.S was actually a passage in Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 2. And first of all, let me just tell you that Isaiah 2 is dealing with the last days, and it tells us right here, in the last days. So we're going to keep that in mind as we start reading this passage. Go into the rocks, hide in the ground from the fearful presence of the Lord and the splendor of his majesty. So we have people who are going to go into the rocks, aka the mountains, to hide from God. The eyes of the arrogant will be humbled and human pride brought low. The Lord alone will be exalted in that day. The Lord Almighty has a day in store for all the proud and lofty, for all that is exalted, and they will be humbled. For all the cedars of Lebanon, tall and lofty, and all the oaks of Bashan, for all the towering mountains and all the high hills, for every lofty tower and every fortified wall, for every trading ship and every stately vessel. The arrogance of man will be brought low, and human pride humbled. The Lord alone will be exalted in that day, and the idols will totally disappear. People will flee to caves in the rocks and to holes in the ground from the fearful presence of the Lord and the splendor of his majesty when he rises to shake the earth. In that day, people will throw away to the moles and bats their idols of silver and idols of gold, which they made to worship. They will flee to caverns in the rocks and to the overhanging crags from the fearful presence of the Lord and the splendor of his majesty when he rises to shake the earth. Stop trusting in mere humans who have but a breath in their nostrils. Why hold them in esteem? So this passage tells us that in the last days, when the Lord comes back, people are going to be hiding in the mountains. They're going to be hiding in holes in rocks, in the ground. And I can't help but think of deep underground military bases when it comes to this. I know that I have done videos before on underground tunnels, and I have done videos before on what lies beneath, on what is under our feet. But I really wanted to address the issue of deep underground military bases when it comes specifically to this verse, because I cannot help but wonder if this is the whole reason that these deep underground military bases were created in the first place. I think that most of us know that the elite who are running everything are coming from, they are from the line of the Nephilim. They are, I believe it's the Snake Brotherhood. And I think it's something that I talked about a little bit in my Seven Sages video. But they know what's coming. They know what's going to happen. It doesn't mean that they're not going to try to thwart it, but they know that in the end, the Lord is going to win. And just like, we can read God's word, they also know God's word. And I cannot help but wonder if this is what they are doing, if they are fortifying a place for them to hide for when God returns, for when Jesus comes back. Now, I have to say, that obviously they can be used in the event of a nuclear attack, or if they are, in the event of any other sort of major catastrophe. And I've talked about this in other videos. But for some reason, I just cannot help but think that these deep underground military bases, they really do have, if you ask me, biblical connotations. So first of all, now there are, from what I've read, about 200 of these D.U.M.B.S in the United States. Now this is just going to tell us about 3 of them. So first of all, and just wait till I get to Mount Weather. I don't know if you've heard of Mount Weather before, but I have talked about it a little bit, but not as much as I'm going to talk about it today. And that is the first one that we're going to read here. We're not going to delve too deeply into this right now, unless I feel led as I'm reading this, but we'll get there. So Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center. The Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center, located in the Blue Ridge Mountains, is an installation for the Department of Homeland Security. FEMA handles the above ground installations and training. Now, first of all, I want to point out about FEMA. FEMA is not some altruistic government organization that is benevolently handing out blankets and water in the event of an emergency. FEMA is a truly scary institution. And let me actually read a little bit to you about FEMA. So this is from Behold a Pale Horse by William Cooper. And I was actually reading this book. I started reading it right before the pandemic happened. And I actually couldn't even finish the book because I saw so many similarities between this book, which was written in 1996, and what was happening in 2020. And when the shutdown happened, that was when I couldn't handle it anymore. And here is one reason why. This is from the book. Nixon's order, which is the one in effect today, allows the government in the form of FEMA to suspend the Constitution for literally any reason they decide to call a national emergency. I cannot find a plan or executive order anywhere which outlines any procedure or allowance for the restoration of the Constitution after a national emergency has ended. This leads to the obvious conclusion that no restoration of the Constitution is contemplated or desired by those in power. In another section of the book, and I will tell you a little bit about William Cooper in a minute, but in another section says that there's a bill that would declare a state of national emergency for 5 years and would allow FEMA to literally take over local, state, and federal government. This means that the Constitution of the United States could be suspended. I cannot tell you how scary that is. Hopefully you realize how scary that is. So again, I'm going to tell you that FEMA is not some benevolent organization handing out, necessities for people who go through natural disasters. Sure, they do stuff like that, but that is not their main purpose. So now getting on to the author of the book that I just quoted from. So Bill Cooper, I'll just read the back a little bit. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but Bill Cooper was a former United States Naval Intelligence Briefing Team member, and he, in this book, reveals information hidden from the public. This information was kept in top secret government files since the 1940s. Cooper unveils the truth as he writes about the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the war on drugs, the secret government, and UFOs. The secret government is actually something else that we're going to be discussing today. Another really scary aspect, but I want to point out to you that William Cooper was shot. So he was assassinated, and they don't assassinate people unless there is something that is being hidden. Anyway, let's just move on. Also, the below ground accommodations are for the President of the United States and vital government officials in a nuclear attack. Think of Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center as the setting for an apocalyptic situation. Well, there you go. Although some government officials went to this installation during the 9/11 attacks. Yeah, you know what? I think it's time to go over Mount Weather just a bit. So this is an overhead view of the Mount Weather Military Institution, which again, I have to remind you, is run by FEMA. So here is another passage from Behold a Pale Horse. Some sources state that Mount Weather is virtually an underground city complete with dormitories, private apartments, streets, sidewalks, cafeterias, hospitals, water purification systems, power plant office buildings, a lake fed by fresh water from underground springs, a mass transit system, and many other astounding things. Several disturbing facts emerge when one researches Mount Weather. One is the conclusion that a complete parallel government exists at the site. Yes, my friends, there is a shadow government there. 9 federal departments exist there: Agriculture, Commerce, HEW, HUD, Interior, Labor, State, Transportation, and the Treasury. Apparently, at least 5 federal agencies are also in residence: the FCC, Selective Service, Federal Power Commission, Civil Service Commission, and the Veterans Administration. 2 privately owned corporations have offices at Mount Weather: the Federal Reserve, but of course, and the U.S. Post Office. There is also an office of the presidency. What makes all this upsetting is that there is a president and a complete set of cabinet officers in residence at Mount Weather. So, I'm just going to break off from there for a minute. Let me repeat that. There is a president and a complete set of cabinet officers in residence at Mount Weather. Not the president that we see, not the cabinet that we see. There is another president that is housed at Mount Weather. There is another cabinet that is housed at Mount Weather. Going back to the book, it says, who are they and who appointed them? Where is such a thing provided for in the Constitution of the United States of America? Certainly nowhere that I know of. So let me just point out to you that when people speak of the secret government or the shadow government, sometimes they are talking about the elite that I mentioned earlier, the lineage of the brotherhood of the snake brotherhood, the lineage of the Nephilim, of what some might call the reptilians, which I do not believe to be alien at all, but I believe to be related to the Watchers. So yes, some people are talking about that, but there is another secret government, aka shadow government, that we need to worry about, and that is the one that is being housed at Mount Weather. Let me also just read this passage to you from the same book. Former high-level officials from Mount Weather agree that the base at Mount Weather is much more than any standby government facility or storage center for the preservation of records. So it's not just to keep the president and his staff safe. No, my friends, that's not all that it's for. Let's continue. They describe it as an actual government in waiting. We do not merely store essential information. The facility attempts to duplicate the vital functions of the executive branch of the administration. As stated above, according to my research, this includes a president and all cabinet members actually in residence. Protocol even demands that subordinates address them as Mr. President and Mr. Secretary. Most of these mysterious appointees have held their positions through several administrations. We just act on the orders of the president in national emergencies, said one former Mount Weather official. So not only are we looking at these deep underground military bases as, being there in the case of, a nuclear attack, but we are also looking at them from the standpoint of knowing that FEMA can take over anytime a national emergency is called, and that we've got an entire unelected, I have to add in, if you actually believe that the elections are legit, an entirely unelected cabinet and president. This is really scary stuff. So Mount Weather is not the only D.U.M.B that is made for the Washington officials. There is also Raven Rock Mountain Complex. In the 1940s, the United States had concerns about having a place to evacuate in the case of an emergency. The United States government built Raven Rock inside of a mountain. So we go back to that again. Inside of a mountain takes you straight back to Isaiah 2. The facility is a self-contained city with a fire department and services. Also, a dining area and medical facilities are a part of the structure. Think of this facility as a fully functioning underground city. And I want to point out to you that for those of you who think that these are in place not only for the officials, but also for them to bring people in to help them to survive, whatever disaster is going to happen. No, they're not going to let everyday Joes into this place. They're not going to just save anyone. So while they sound all nice with a dining area, medical facilities, and like Mount Weather has apartment buildings and, just a power plant and all this stuff, you can't look at this as, a sanctuary for the common populace. We are not included in this. Let's continue. Raven Rock lost its charm during the Cold War in the 1990s, but the facility is back in action since the attacks on September 11th. Today, Raven Rock is 650 acres, and the facility is a deep underground military base. This base works as a nuclear shelter and a place to command the country in the event of a crisis. The facility is in Pennsylvania, and it is near the Blue Ridge Summit. Publicly, there are agencies involved with this deep underground military base. I'm going to stop right there because I see that it is near the Blue Ridge Summit. And let's go back up here. Blue Ridge Mountains. Now, there are rumors that there is a train system underneath there, a subway system that moves so fast that it can get from the East Coast to the West Coast in about 20 minutes. So I'm going to link, Timothy Alberino has a fantastic video about this. So I'm going to link it in the description box so that you can watch that. But let's just move on with the Cheyenne Mountain Complex. The Cheyenne Mountain Complex is a deep underground military base located near Colorado Springs. The Air Force Space Command handles this facility, although it is a joint effort with other government organizations. Also, the facility not only supports the Space Command, it also supports Peterson Air Force Base. The facility's mission and the 21st Space Wing include handling missile warnings and keeping track of space objects. Also, the mission includes supporting troops. Let's just go down here. It says, the Cheyenne Mountain Complex is a deep underground military base with some exciting features. The mountain is granite and 6 tunnels lead to the facility. Also, the tunnels themselves are a massive 3 stories tall. The facility is strong enough to handle nuclear bombs and electromagnetic pulses. The doors to the facility are over 3 feet thick as well. So I have to point out that, just knowing that there are 200 of these facilities just in the United States alone, and knowing the extent of them, I cannot help but just reiterate the fact that they know that something big is coming. And I believe that they know that it is definitely related to apocalyptic events, the apocalyptic events that we see in Isaiah chapter 2. Since these tunnels are so intricate and so widespread, there is much speculation that they are actually that they have been here since pre-flood times, because most of us who are here, at least on my channel, if you're watching, most of us realize that antediluvian technology was much better than what we have today. So there are a lot of people who believe that they have been there since all that time, and that is how possibly some Nephilim and some other creatures may have escaped the flood. I don't know. But what I am also going to show you is that there is also a boring machine that is used, that it actually doesn't even drill into the rock. It melts the rock and it turns into like almost a form of glass. So we do have technology that they don't release to the general public, just like that train system that I was telling you about. They're not going to tell us the high-tech things that they have going on there, because they need to keep us in the dark. Because if we know everything that is going on, we're going to revolt as a people. At least I would hope so. Although people are so blinded that I don't know, that might not even happen. So this section here is actually written by Phil Schneider. And if you've never heard of Phil Schneider, he was also someone else who was involved in top secret projects for the military. And he was also someone who ended up getting assassinated for breaking the agreement that he had made to not a non-disclosure agreement, because he said that the world needed to know these things. And he survived, I believe it was 13 assassination attempts. And then the 14th one, unfortunately, was successful. But let's just read a little bit what he had to say. This is a $13 million tunnel boring machine used for tunneling at the Nevada test site. Remember that Area 51 is part of the test site. Many other types of TBMs are used by many government agencies, including the nuclear-powered TBM that melts solid rock and leaves behind glass-like walls. Most tunneling activity is under military installations, and all information is highly restricted. Former employees of said facilities have surfaced over the years to talk of massive underground installations in places like Area 51, the Northrop facility in Antelope Valley, California, rumored to have 42 levels, and the Lockheed installation near Edwards, California. The black budget currently consumes $1.25 trillion per year. At least this amount is used in black programs like those concerned with deep underground military bases. Presently, there are 129 deep underground military bases in the United States. Now, I have to point out that Phil Schneider, he was assassinated. Well, let's actually look that up because I don't remember. I believe it was in the early 2000s. See, doesn't say. Okay, 1996. So we can tell from just knowing that if the tunnel boring machine, if it's as successful as they say it is, it wouldn't have been too hard for them to have come up with that many more D.U.M.B.S, deep underground military bases. So they have been building these 129 bases day and night, unceasingly since the early 1940s. Some of them were built even earlier than that. These bases are basically large cities underground connected by high-speed magneto-leviton trains that have speeds up to Mach 2. Several books have been written about this activity. The average depth of these bases is over a mile, and they, again, are basically whole cities underground. They all are between 2.66 and 4.25 cubic miles in size. They have laser drilling machines that can drill a tunnel 7 miles long in one day. I was involved in building an addition to the deep underground military base at Dulce, which is probably the deepest base. It goes down 7 levels and over 2.5 miles deep. I helped hollow out more than 13 deep underground military bases in the United States. I believe he was an engineer. More thought-provoking images of tunnel boring equipment it shows here. Now, speaking of Dulce, there are rumors of some extremely disturbing beings that are underground. And let's just start with Dulce since we are on the subject of Phil Schneider and that was brought up. In the Timothy Alberino video that I'm going to be linking in the description box, there is actually a talk of Phil Schneider. He's actually speaking. He's at a speaking engagement and he is telling about what we are going to be reading about right here. So he had a battle with Greys at Dulce Base. Now, I want to point out that I don't necessarily think that these Greys are aliens. I don't think they are. I think that they are demonically related. So I have to point that out. I am not a heliocentrist, so I don't think that there are beings coming from other planets. But I do believe that they are evil beings. So let's just read a little bit here. The mysterious phenomena of otherworldly beings and flying saucers of various sizes and shapes make ufology a complex field to study. I'm not interested in ufology, so let's just go down here. Phil Schneider's case is the most bizarre. He died on January 17th, 1996, reportedly strangled by a catheter found wrapped around his neck. The unusual death being dismissed by the authorities as a suicide. I have to stop right here because I mentioned Phil Schneider in a video quite a while ago, and I actually did get an email from someone who had spoken with his ex-wife, and they sent me some transcripts of things that she had said and that she wanted to get the word out, and they asked if I would get the word out about them. And to be honest, I never shared the things that she shared with them because you have to be afraid to disclose things like this. And so I need to think about my children and our safety because, even though I am just, some seemingly small YouTube channel out there, I do not trust how far any of these people will go. So at this point in time, I'm just not going to share that. I may get to that point at some time, but right now, but I will tell you that yes, she definitely is saying, his ex-wife is saying it was not a suicide. Phil Schneider was born on April 23rd, 1947. He was a self-taught geologist and explosives expert. Okay, so that's what he was. He is known as a person who worked for many years in collaboration with special services of the United States, had access to information of the third level of secrecy. Phil Schneider was able to take part in the construction of at least 2 underground bases for the so-called secret government, as well as in the construction of 13 deep-seated military bases underground. 2 of these bases were major, including the much-rumored bioengineering facility at Dulce, New Mexico. Let's see. Let's just continue. And actually here he is speaking. So I will leave this link in the description box too. And this is him speaking about his encounter in the military base. Let's see. This is really interesting. It says that the American government entered into an agreement with the gray aliens. Again, I don't think that's what they are, in 1954. This mutually beneficial cooperation agreement is called the Greada Treaty. Aliens do not comply with it. Well, I wouldn't expect something evil to comply with it. It is a secret. I'm just going to skip down here to number 5. You can read the rest of these if you like to. It is a secret that the U.S. government has a device for causing earthquakes. The San Francisco earthquake in 1989 and the Kobe earthquake in 1995 did not have a pulse wave, which confirms their artificial origin. And I have been hearing from people that there have been lots of earthquakes that are believed to have been started in the tunnels recently. So I'm just going to leave it at that right now. It doesn't even talk here about his encounter with the aliens. Okay, so here it tells us that when the U.S. government was merely attempting to stimulate subterranean gas reservoirs and encountering the cave-dwelling aliens. Now, I have to point out that Phil Schneider claims that the government knew all along that these beings were down there. They were drilling down there and didn't care. They knew that they were down there. It says that he not only claimed to have seen the beings below, meaning under the ground, but to have lost several fingers during a firefight between terrified soldiers and frightened alien life forms. And so that's basically what happened, is that they went down there and they saw these things, and there was actually a battle, a firefight. Some sort of laser it struck him in the abdomen, and it burned his fingers off. It also scorched his feet. He ended up having, I believe, a form of cancer at some point from the radiation from this. And here it tells you, we'll get there. While Schneider claimed that roughly 60 people were killed in the purported firefight below the desert, none of his statements have ever been proven. Well, of course not. They're not going to tell people that. Nonetheless, he was certainly missing numerous digits while claiming as much. He died by suicide in 1996. And again, I think that most of us know that wasn't a suicide. So besides whatever beings Phil Schneider encountered underground, there are also stories of the ant people of the Hopi, and I've talked about them in several videos, so I'll just leave this link in the description box. But these were also beings that came up from underground and supposedly helped the Hopi Indians at one point. So, and this is, I've done, I've talked before about creatures that are said to live underground. So knowing that there are beings under the ground is nothing new, but to hear that they are actually being found in these tunnels, which I have to, tell you are connected nationwide. So let me just show you. A friend of mine sent this to me. So this is supposed to be a map of the tunnels under the ground. Again, this could be speculation. I don't know. But it's definitely interesting. I will also want to show you. So the top map here shows mysterious cases of people vanishing without a trace. And the bottom map shows America's largest cave systems. And you have to, you can't help but wonder, look, it's almost identical. And you can't help but wonder, are these tunnels also connected to these cave systems? Because you would think that it would make it easier if there were already existing caves down there, and then they were adding these tunnels to it and just kind of connecting the caves. Certainly seems like it would make things much simpler. And this is supposed to be a diagram, a schematic of the underground of Dulce Base. So where we were just talking about with Phil Schneider. So the first level, like I'm guessing, well, the ground level is here. And then the first level is security and communications. Then there's the human staff housing, the execs and the labs, the mind control experiments. Never heard of MK Ultra? Alien housing, genetic experiments, and cryogenic storage. Again, this is all speculation. I have no way to prove this, but this isn't something that is going to be easily proven because they are so good at hiding things. There are also stories of giants being found in these tunnels, both conscious and also in stasis. So this is supposed to be a photo of a giant that was found in stasis. If I'm not mistaken, this is the one that was found in the Middle East, and there are some who believe that this is Nimrod. Now, interestingly, he has reddish hair. You can't really tell because the coloring is not very good in this photo. He has reddish hair, and a lot of the stories of the giants report them as having red hair. So giants that have been in hibernation and stasis chambers for thousands of years are awakening and are being sought out by elite military forces, according to several independent sources. After being located, awakened giants are allegedly being captured and held hostage by powerful global elite groups that do not want the rest of humanity to learn the truth. Again, I don't know if any of this is true, but I do find it very interesting that so many traditions have giants as living underground. So here it says, when I was in the program, the secret space program, which I'm going to tell you I'm extremely skeptical about because I don't believe there's such a thing as space. But anyway, when I would have time to sit and look at the smart glass pad, there was lots of information that I looked at. And one of them was that there were beings that they found underneath the surface of Earth. Underneath, usually underneath mountains, burial mountains, Indian burial mounds that were not dead but weren't quite alive. They called them stasis beings. And it turned out that they had used a technology that had been there long prior from this group they called the ancient builder race. So it didn't put the beings in stasis that a lot of us would think of as in being frozen, but it just changed the way they experienced time. They would probably go to sleep for maybe 20 minutes and 30,000 years or so would pass by. Good described the size of the beings found in the stasis chambers when they were first discovered in the 19th century all over the planet. And to look down in, they saw these very tall beings, or very large giant humans with reddish beards. These tall, red-headed, red beard groups were in Europe and South and North America, and apparently at one time, before the last ice age apparently, they had a very large area that they ruled. So, when you just connect the fact that we have, just in the United States alone, all of these deep underground military bases, all of these tunnels, just connecting the entire country pretty much. Then we have these stories of these creatures underground and these false earthquakes in these tunnels. You can't help but wonder what is happening. And again, I'm just going to go back to the fact that the people who are in control, I was going to say our government, but it's not even really our government because they're not really the ones in charge. They know what's coming. And so the only thing that they know to do is, where are you going to hide from something so powerful? And so to them, the most fortified place would be in the mountains, in the rocks, just as Isaiah prophesied. And, we see that. We see it happening all around us, and yet there are so many people who still, deny that the prophecies are real. And so I just wanted to share with you what I found about these deep underground military bases. There's honestly so much more about them, so much that I have not really had time to share. And I may do a future video about them, but at this point in time, suffice it to say that there is nothing that is going to hide these people from judgment, no matter how big, no matter how thick that mountain is. That's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one either here or over on Instagram. And if you like my work, you can check out my Patreon page, and I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.